now we're going to be talking about the labor markets in an imperfectly competitive market. So now we're having where if the employer doesn't sell its output in a perfectly competitive industry, they will have a downward sloping demand for output, in which they will have to change their price. So in this one, what's happening is that now your price could change. So we have to change how many people we can hire. So because your price is changing, this is changing your marginal revenue. So now we're going back to what I was saying about the marginal revenue product of labor. Okay. So now we're going to be taking the marginal product of how much you're making times the marginal revenue. So basically what's happening here is this is the value of that next person that you hire. Right? It's like basically, hey, how much stuff can you make? Marginal product. And then how much extra money are we making because of that? So that's the marginal revenue. So marginal revenue times the marginal product, and therefore we get the marginal revenue product. So earlier we talked about how having the value of the marginal product which was price times marginal product. But here we're going to have the demand for labor be the marginal revenue times the marginal product. The big key here in the difference is that if you're in a perfect competition, remember that your price was the same as your marginal revenue. So that, so you're going to do the same thing there. But on this one, we're mainly going to be looking at the marginal revenue. Marginal revenue. Okay. So we're going to be doing the same thing that we talked about, but now our margin revenue is going to be changing. So for firms with market power, such as a monopolistic competition, they would choose where the market wage is equal to the MRP. So as a result, you will be hiring less people in an imperfectly competitive industry than a perfectly competitive industry. Basically what's happening here is that if you had a price of $3, okay, and then you do the marginal product, you would be hiring a certain amount of workers. But because you're doing marginal revenue, which is less than the price, then that's where we're going to have less people hired. Okay, so let me show you. With the perfect competition in the labor market, you're doing the value of the marginal product. All that was the marginal product times the price. But now because we're in imperfect, such as monopolistic competition, you would be doing MRP, which is MR times the marginal product, and therefore you are going to be getting the demand for labor. Okay, so if we're doing the same thing where we have the supply curve come in, we're going to be hiring this amount of workers in a perfect competition market, and we're still doing the same thing where we're doing the wage equals the marginal revenue product, which happens right here. So this is where you hire in an imperfect competition. It can kind of be confusing about which one is which. So that's why I really like to stick to the marginal revenue product of labor. Okay? Because in a perfect competition, like I said, your marginal revenue is the same as your price. So therefore, if you did the marginal revenue times the marginal product, you get the MRP. Now your MRP is going to be different between a perfect competition and a monopolistic, but in terms of making it simple, in terms of trying to find the amount of employees that you're hiring, that stays the same. You're doing the MRP equal to the wage. That's what we're really looking for. So your optimal choice is going to be MRP equal to the wage. That's your optimal choice. As I mentioned here, in a perfectly competitive market, we will be having supply and demand. Okay, so we will have an equilibrium. That's where we get the wage. The market demand for labor is the sum of all the individual firms' demand for labor, and the market supply of labor is going to be the households. Okay. So going back to what we talked about, where we had the different determinants of the supply of labor, same thing that we're talking about here. Okay. If the supply changes, that's going to change the wage, and if the wage changes, that changes the amount of people that you hire. For example, if we are having a situation where more people are graduating, this will increase the supply of labor, which decreases the wage. And because the wage decreases, such as here on the firm graph, you are now hiring more people. Did the demand for labor change? No. Only the supply of labor changed because we have more people working. So if you have more people working, they're willing to, you're going to, basically the value per employee is going down, so the wage goes down. Okay. So that's what's happening in a perfectly competitive market and an imperfect competition market, where we are basically hiring wage equals MRP. That's what we're doing. If we're having a situation where, the demand has all the power, so instead of having multiple firms becoming the demand for labor, what if we had, like a monopoly, one firm doing all of the demand for labor? So that's called a monopsony. A monopsony is going to be the sole employer that has no direct competition in hiring and exploits its market power by offering lower wages than would exist in the competitive market. So basically what's happening here is that we only have one place that everybody could work at. In this town, we only have one place that is offering jobs. If you want a job, then you have to accept whatever job that they're offering, whatever wage that is, if you want to work in this town. An example would be a coal company in a West Virginia town. So basically, it's a small town, and if you want a job, the only one available is being working for the coal company. Okay. So the good news is that the firm, because it is a monopolist, basically the sole supplier of in the market, then they can charge whatever price it wants. However, if you charge too low of a wage, absolutely no one's going to work for you, and therefore they're going to move to a different town. So as a monopsony, yes, you do have power, but people will only work to a certain point. Okay? So what's happening here is a monopsony has all the power, has all the hiring power. However, if they want to hire more people, they need to increase the wage. Wage higher, hire more people. So the big thing about a monopsony is that they are the sole person that is giving out jobs. So how do they hire people? We're looking at the same thing about the MRP, but now we're going to have to add something else. We have to add the marginal cost of labor. So the marginal cost of labor is basically just how much extra you have to be paying them. Okay? But the thing is that your marginal cost of labor is going to be higher than the wage. This is because to hire one more worker, this requires paying a higher wage rate, not just for the new worker, but for all the previous ones too. So basically, to avoid discrimination, okay, if you hire one person at $10 an hour and then you have to hire another person at 12, we both get 12. So let's take a look here. If we had one person paying them $1 an hour, the total cost of labor is $1. Okay, $1 for one worker. But if we wanted to hire two people, we have to pay a higher wage because we need to convince that next person to come in. So we're going to raise the wage. But now you have two people working for $2 an hour. Okay, he was working at $1, but now he's working at 2. So this means your total cost of labor is 4. So now your marginal cost is 3. Because you went from here to here, this cost increased by 3. Okay? Then if we were to hire more people by increasing the wage again, you have to pay everybody that $3. So 3 people at $3 an hour is $9. So the marginal would be 5 because you were at 4 and now you're at 9. That's an increase of 5. So that's how the marginal cost of labor goes for a monopsony. If you want to hire more people, you're going to have to pay a lot more. So let's take a look at that. We do have the upward sloping market supply curve, and we do have the downward sloping demand. We do have that. And your demand for labor is the MRP. So that doesn't change. Your marginal revenue product is the demand for labor. And so if you want to hire more people, you need to increase your wage, which is why the marginal factor cost or the marginal cost of labor is upward sloping. So as a result, the marginal cost of it is greater than wage, and so therefore the marginal cost is going to be higher than the supply of labor. So this is what a monopsony graph looks like. We have a demand curve, supply curve, and a marginal factor cost. Okay? So a monopsony is going to hire workers up to the point LM. This is where the demand is the same as the marginal cost. That makes sense, right? Because just like profit max, which was MR equals MC, we're going to do the MRP equal to the MC. Same idea. Okay, so the demand for labor is your MRP. You're going to be hiring people where the MRP is equal to the MC. So you're going to be hiring this many people. Find out where the intersection is and go straight down. That's how many people you hire. Now, what wage do we pay them? Well, we do not do this. This is not the wage. Okay? What's happening here is the monopoly determines, okay, MRP equals MC, and this gives us a quantity of LM. Okay, that quantity. How many people are wanting to work at LM? Right here, at the supply of labor. So how much do we have to pay these people? This amount of people on this supply curve are willing to work for this wage. Okay? So once you determine the quantity, you look at supply at this quantity. So just like we did with monopolies, where we did MR equals MC, quantity, price, right? And we, in order to do price, we had to go up to the demand curve. So now we're going to flip it around here. We're now going to do MRP equals MC, quantity, but now we're going to go up to the supply curve. Okay? And that's how you find the wage for a monopsony. Okay? So let's take a look at the difference between a monopsony and perfect competition, or a perfectly competitive labor market. So basically, a monopsony will pay a lower wage and they will hire less people. A competitive market will do demand is equal to supply. We know that because of the demand is the MRP and the supply is the wage, right? You only work at this wage. Right? So this would be the competitive market because that's where the market wage is. But in a monopsony, you need to do MRP equals MC, find the quantity, and then find the wage. Okay? So that's how you hire, that's how many people we're going to be hiring in a monopsony, and that's the wage that we're going to be paying them. Okay? So, real quick again, between the difference between a perfectly competitive labor market so this is basically where we have multiple firms hiring. Okay? You have multiple people that are hiring people, so the households have different options that they can work at. So if they have different options they can work at, they are more elastic, so that's why it's horizontal. So we have a demand, supply, we have a wage, this is the supply of labor, the demand for labor is your MRP. They're going to be hiring this many workers at this wage. Okay? A monopsony is going to be hiring in one market. They have the supply curve. They have the marginal cost. Notice how like I have the supply curve and then I have this marginal cost right here. Okay. So that's my marginal cost curve. And then I have my demand for labor, which is also the MRP. So I'm going to do MRP equals MC. I'm going to find the quantity. And then I'm going to go up to the supply curve to find the wage. And that's the difference between a monopsony and a perfectly competitive labor market. Okay? So in the next chapter, we'll talk more about financial markets. Okay? I'll see you there.